Some endings arrive not with dramatic confrontations or tearful goodbyes, but with the cold ping of a text message notification. For Claire Morrison, 15 years of marriage ended exactly that way, on a Tuesday afternoon while she sat in a budget meeting at work. Her phone buzzed on the conference table and she glanced down to see a message from her husband David. "I want a divorce. I've met someone who makes me happy in ways you never could. I need to move forward with my life. My lawyer will be in touch." No phone call. No face-to-face conversation. No acknowledgement of 15 years of shared history, of building a life together, of promises made and supposedly kept. Just 42 words that shattered her world while she sat surrounded by colleagues discussing quarterly projections. Claire and David had met in college, both ambitious and driven, both determined to build successful careers. They married young, at 24, when they were still figuring out who they were as individuals. They grew up together, or at least Claire thought they had. David built a career in pharmaceutical sales while Claire worked her way up to senior management at a tech company. They bought a house in the suburbs, traveled internationally twice a year, maintained an active social life with couples they considered friends. They had decided together not to have children, a choice both claimed to be comfortable with, preferring to focus on careers and enjoying their freedom. But in the last 2 years, David had changed in ways Claire kept trying to ignore. He became distant, critical, finding fault with everything she did. The way she loaded the dishwasher was wrong. Her laugh was too loud at dinner parties. She worked too much or not enough depending on his mood. She suggested marriage counseling and he dismissed it as unnecessary. She planned romantic getaways and he was always too busy. She cooked his favorite meals and he barely noticed. Claire attributed it to work stress, to the normal challenges of long marriages, to a phase that would pass if she was just patient enough. The truth, which she discovered quickly through mutual friends who suddenly felt obligated to tell her everything they had been keeping quiet, was that David had been having an affair with Amber for over a year. Amber was the 28-year-old secretary at his office, blonde and bubbly and everything Claire was not. They had been discreet but not discreet enough. Office colleagues knew. Friends at their social events had seen signs. Claire had been the oblivious wife while people whispered behind her back, pitying her or judging her depending on their own relationship to drama. David wanted the divorce finalized quickly and cleanly. He proposed a 50-50 split of their assets since they had both contributed financially to the marriage. No alimony since they both had established careers and similar earning potential. Paperwork filed and processed within 3 months. Claire, still in shock and reeling from the betrayal, agreed to most of it because she wanted it over. She wanted him out of her house, out of her life, out of her daily reality. Fighting would only prolong the pain and keep her tethered to someone who clearly wanted nothing to do with her. During the tedious process of separating assets and closing joint accounts, Claire's divorce attorney asked about health insurance. David had been covered under Claire's company health plan for the past 7 years, ever since a period when he was between jobs and she had added him to her excellent corporate coverage. He had never switched back to his own insurance because Claire's plan was significantly better and cheaper than anything he could obtain individually through his employer or the marketplace. The attorney explained that once the divorce was finalized, Claire had no legal obligation to maintain David on her health insurance. In fact, most companies required the removal of ex-spouses within 30 days of divorce finalization. It was standard procedure, nothing unusual or vindictive about it. Claire thought about this information carefully. David had several pre-existing conditions that would make individual insurance expensive. High blood pressure that required daily medication. High cholesterol despite being relatively young. A history of back problems that necessitated regular chiropractic treatment and occasional physical therapy. His family also had a significant history of heart disease, his father having died of a heart attack at 59. Without Claire's coverage, David would likely pay 3 or 4 times as much for inferior insurance with higher deductibles and co-pays. She signed the paperwork to remove him from her health plan on the same day their divorce was finalized. She didn't tell David about it. He would receive notification eventually from the insurance company, a standard letter informing him his coverage had been terminated due to change in marital status. But that notification could take weeks to arrive, and by then it would be his problem, not hers. She cancelled his coverage and deliberately did not think about the consequences. She was done being responsible for David Morrison and his well-being. 3 months after the divorce became final, Claire made the mistake of looking at social media and saw photographs that made her stomach turn. David and Amber were getting married at an upscale winery venue in Napa Valley, an elaborate celebration with over 100 guests. The photos showed Amber in a wedding dress that probably cost more than Claire's entire wedding had 15 years earlier. David looked genuinely happy in ways Claire couldn't remember seeing in years, his arm around his young bride, champagne glass raised in celebration. Claire tried not to look but found herself scrolling through photos posted by guests, torturing herself with images of her ex-husband beginning a new life with the woman who had destroyed their marriage. It was painful but also strangely liberating, seeing clearly that he had moved on completely and that she needed to do the same. She closed the social media apps and poured herself a glass of wine, determined to stop giving David Morrison any more of her emotional energy. Then her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer but something made her pick up. It was Michael, David's younger brother, someone Claire had always gotten along with during the marriage. His voice sounded strained and strange in a way that immediately put her on alert. "Claire, I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me. Did you cancel David's health insurance?" Michael's question was direct, almost accusatory. Claire confirmed that yes, she had removed him from her policy as part of the divorce settlement. It was standard procedure. Why was he asking? Michael took a deep breath and Claire heard hospital sounds in the background, announcements over intercoms and the beeping of medical equipment. Something happened at the wedding reception. David started having severe chest pains during the dinner. They called an ambulance and took him to the emergency room. He had a heart attack, Claire. Not a massive one, but serious enough. He's stable now, but when they tried to process his insurance information, they discovered he doesn't have any coverage. His policy was cancelled months ago. Claire felt the room tilt. Is he okay? What are the doctors saying? Michael explained that David had suffered what doctors called a moderate myocardial infarction. He would survive, but he needed cardiac catheterization, possibly stent placement, definitely ongoing medication and monitoring. Without insurance, the costs would be astronomical. The emergency room visit alone would be tens of thousands of dollars. The procedures and follow-up care could easily reach into hundreds of thousands. Claire spent that night awake, wrestling with emotions she couldn't untangle. Part of her felt cold satisfaction. David was finally facing consequences for his choices. He had left her cruelly, started a new life without looking back, and now he was discovering that his decisions had costs he hadn't anticipated. But another part of her, the part that had loved this man for 15 years, felt crushing guilt. She had cancelled his insurance knowing he had heart disease in his family history, knowing his pre-existing conditions put him at risk. She hadn't caused his heart attack, but she had created a situation where he had no safety net when it happened. The story spread quickly through their social circles. David's family was furious with Claire. His mother called screaming that Claire was vindictive and cruel, that she had endangered David's life out of spite. Friends began taking sides. Some argued that Claire had simply done what anyone does in a divorce, that David should have been responsible enough to obtain his own insurance coverage. Others claimed she knew he was vulnerable, that she had been deliberately malicious by not warning him about the cancellation. Claire consulted with her divorce attorney who assured her she had done nothing illegal or even unusual. She had no obligation to maintain an ex-spouse on her health insurance or to notify him of changes to his coverage. David was an adult responsible for his own affairs, especially once the divorce was finalized. He should have verified his insurance status, particularly knowing he was going through a major life change. Legally, Claire was completely in the clear. But morally, the situation was far more complicated. David was now facing hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills. His new marriage was beginning under crushing financial stress. Amber, who had been so eager to marry a successful divorced man with money, was discovering the reality of massive medical debt. The hospital would work out a payment plan, but it would take years, possibly decades to pay off. It would affect their credit, their ability to buy a house, every major financial decision for the foreseeable future. Claire received calls and messages from David's family and friends, some angry and accusatory, others pleading for her to help somehow. David's sister sent a long email explaining that David realized he had made mistakes, that he was sorry for how he had treated Claire, and that they were desperate for any assistance she might be willing to provide. The subtext was clear even if the words weren't explicit, they wanted Claire to pay David's medical bills. For weeks, Claire wrestled with what to do. She could walk away completely, let David face the full consequences of not having insurance. It would be justified given how he had treated her, how he had ended their marriage with a text message and immediately moved on to someone else. Or she could do something he didn't deserve, but that might allow her to move forward without the weight of guilt. After extensive conversations with her therapist, Claire made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She contacted the hospital's billing department and negotiated directly with them. She agreed to pay half of David's medical expenses, approximately $90,000. Not because she owed him anything, but because she needed to live with herself and her own values. She made it explicitly clear through her attorney that this was a one-time payment, that she was not reassuming any responsibility for David or his well-being, that it changed nothing about their divorce or how he had treated her. This was about her own peace of mind, not about helping him. David called her the next day, the first time they had spoken directly since that devastating text message months earlier. His voice was subdued, broken in a way she had never heard before. He tried to thank her, but Claire cut him off immediately. "I'm not doing this for you, David. I want you to understand that clearly. I'm doing this for me. You left me in the cruelest way possible. You betrayed 15 years of marriage, had an affair, and ended our relationship with a text message like I was someone you'd been casually dating for a few weeks. I canceled your insurance because I was angry and hurt, and I wanted you to face consequences for treating me like I didn't matter." She continued, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "But I'm not the kind of person who lets someone drown in medical debt, even someone who hurt me as deeply as you did. So I'm paying part of your hospital bills, not because you deserve it, but because I need to live with who I am and the choices I make." Claire took a breath before delivering the final point she needed him to hear. "But you need to understand something crucial. Your choices have consequences. You chose to have an affair. You chose to end our marriage via text. You chose not to verify your insurance coverage when you were going through a divorce. I didn't cause your heart attack. I didn't force you to ignore your healthcare coverage. You're a grown man and those were your responsibilities. I removed you from my insurance like any divorced person would. If that seems cold to you, then consider how cold it was to receive the end of a 15-year marriage through a text message." David was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "You're right. About all of it. I treated you terribly. I acted like you didn't matter, like 15 years meant nothing. And I should have taken care of my own insurance. I just thought everything would work out, that I didn't need to worry about those kinds of details. I was wrong about a lot of things." The conversation ended without reconciliation or real forgiveness, but with an understanding that they would both move forward separately. Claire paid the hospital bill and then blocked David's number permanently. She didn't need updates about his health or his life. That chapter was closed. In the months that followed, Claire heard through mutual acquaintances that David and Amber were struggling. The heart attack had been a serious wake-up call. David had to completely change his lifestyle, giving up alcohol, eating dramatically healthier, exercising regularly, managing stress more carefully. His high-pressure pharmaceutical sales job was no longer sustainable given his health situation. He transitioned to a less stressful position with a significantly lower salary. Amber, who had envisioned a glamorous married life, was discovering the reality of medical bills, financial constraints, and a husband dealing with serious health issues. It wasn't the romantic fantasy she had imagined when she started the affair. Claire, meanwhile, began the slow process of rebuilding her life. She committed to regular therapy to process the betrayal and divorce. She traveled solo for the first time in her adult life, visiting places she had always wanted to see but David had never been interested in. She reconnected with friends she had neglected during her marriage, rediscovering parts of herself she had set aside trying to be a good wife to someone who ultimately didn't value her. She even started dating again, cautiously at first, meeting people through friends and eventually trying dating apps. It felt strange and vulnerable, but also exciting to imagine building something new with someone who might actually appreciate her. A year after everything happened, Claire reflected on the choices she had made and what they meant. Canceling David's insurance had been an act of anger, but it hadn't been illegal or even uncommon in divorces. Paying his medical bills had been an act of compassion she wasn't obligated to provide. Both decisions were hers to make, and she had made them based on who she wanted to be, not on what David deserved or what others expected of her. The situation taught her important lessons about boundaries, consequences, and the difference between revenge and self-protection. It also taught her that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good, and doing the wrong thing doesn't always feel bad. Morality in real situations is far more complicated than it appears in abstract theory. She learned that she could be both the person who removes an ex-spouse from insurance without warning and the person who pays $90,000 to help that same ex-spouse with medical debt. Both actions could coexist in the same person because humans are complex and motivations are layered. She could be hurt and angry and protective of herself while also being compassionate and unwilling to let someone suffer unnecessarily. Most importantly, Claire learned that she didn't need David's gratitude or approval or even his understanding of why she made the choices she did. She needed her own peace of mind, her own ability to look in the mirror and recognize herself as someone who acted according to her values even when it was difficult. The story didn't have a tidy ending where everyone learned lessons and relationships were restored. David and Amber remained married, presumably working through their financial and health challenges together. Claire moved forward with her own life, eventually finding happiness in ways she hadn't expected. They existed in separate orbits now, connected only by shared history and a complex situation that neither would forget. So what would you have done in Claire's position? Would you have cancelled your ex-spouse's health insurance as standard divorce procedure, or would you have given explicit warning? When you discovered he had a heart attack and no coverage, would you have helped financially or let him face the complete consequences of his own failure to obtain insurance? Where is the line between justified self-protection and revenge that crosses into cruelty? How do you balance living according to your own values with allowing people to experience the natural consequences of their choices? These questions don't have universal answers. Every person has to decide based on their own moral compass, their own capacity for compassion versus their need for boundaries, their own understanding of what they owe to people who have hurt them. Claire made her choices and lived with them. What choices would you make? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Share your own experiences with divorce, betrayal, and navigating the complicated territory of doing the right thing when you're not even sure what the right thing is. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think about responsibility and consequences and the messy reality of human relationships, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Be sure to watch our next recommended video where we explore another story about difficult moral choices and finding your way through impossible situations. Thank you for being here with us through this complex and challenging journey.